По историческую и профессиональную преемственность Российская правовая академия сегодня является современным и престижным учебным заведением.
Те лица, которые мы наблюдали здесь в прошлом году. Потому что это значит, что вы сюда приезжаете и вам...
Good afternoon, my dear colleagues. My name is Nikolai Zenichev. I am from Northwest branch of Russian Law Academy of Ministry of Justice of Russian Federation. Situation when our countries, such as the United States of America or European Union countries, think that in these countries, like Libya, there is not enough
in Russia, whether it's a myth or a reality.
In modern dictionaries, an election is determined as a formal decision-making process by which a population chooses an individual to
My name is Ivan Govorov. I am a student for second year of Russian Law Academy from Tula. I want to present my report, The Electoral Law in Russia. The right to vote is a legal concept which has two basic meanings. Impartial suffrage is a branch of the sub-constitutional law, made up of law established rules of customary practice, governing the citizens to vote, and the electoral method for following the government.
What is it in Russia? Implementation of the electoral rights of the people is one of the key and the main of priorities of the state policy aimed at creating united strong power and is directly related to its independence and its sovereignty.
My heart's in the highlands. My heart is not here. My heart's in the highlands, a chasing the deer, a chasing the wild deer and following the road. My heart's in the highlands. Wherever.
Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of my presentation is the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice is a primary judicial organ of the United Nations. It is based in Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands. Its main functions are to settle legal disputes submitted to it by states and to provide advisory opinions on legal questions submitted to it by duly authorized international organs, agencies, and the UN General Assembly. Since its creation, 4 or 5 permanent members of the Security Council, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom and the United States, have always had a judge on the court.
My name is Alexei Koldoba. I am the student of Russian Law Academy of Ministry of Justice. I would like to tell you about international humanitarian law, its origins and basic principles.
Flowers in the past. People worshipped the sun and were able to communicate with it. One day, a group of philosophers wanted to build a temple to worship.
Good morning, dear professors, colleagues. I would like to take a few minutes of your valuable time to speak about transposition of European Union directives. It's common knowledge that the success of European integration process involving the free movement of goods, persons, services and capital depends on the compliance of member states with the European Union decisions. In the European Union context, compliance is defined by 3 processes, which you can see on the slide, actually. The European Union is a law-intensive organization. The successful enforcement of European Union laws is conditional upon the extent to which member states have adequately incorporated the European Union decisions.
The states in the European Court of Justice, what's the remedies for the states? What's punishment we have?
Maybe you were not attentive enough to while listening to my presentation, but I have mentioned that the Commission usually files a case in European Court of Justice, and then the case is considered. I think it will be the topic of my next presentation.
I don't know where to find you. I don't know how to reach you.
the court, as well as the criminal investigator, with the consent of the head of investigative body or required with the consent of the public prosecutor, have the right to terminate the criminal case on the ground of application given by the victim or his legal representative.
You better get a chill, boy, you wanna take a leak, 'cause I'm your king of freak. Can't you see the way I move, my dress, my flesh is
Чубова Наталья. Corruption is a complex social phenomenon that began in ancient times and continues to exist today in virtually every country in the world. Corruption means bribery of social and political leaders, government officials and officers.
Entrusted power for private gain. Corruption is a criminal offense. Bribery, extortional, and embezzlement are the illegal acts often associated with corruption.
Transparency International is an organization that carefully studies corruption worldwide. Every year the organization publishes the so-called Corruption Perception Index, CPI.
Why you cry, wonderful lady? Why you cry? Find a fear. Why you cry? Just tell me why. I like you blind, running behind you. How many people just wanna be friends?
My name is Pavel and I am a second-year student from Tula. And I'd like to tell you some words about corruption. Corruption is abuse of power for mercenary motives. This is the simplest definition. And continue, I'd like to say that you have heard about CPI from previous.
We love to ride a bike, playing hide and seek, sneaking all the night, dancing in the street. I look back at the time, now I realize she loved to play the fight, should have seen in her eyes.
I want to tell you that practicing Russian lawyers have to always take active part in various procedures associated with the reconciliation of the parties, both at legal aid rendering in civil cases and the protection of realization in criminal cases.
Provision of legal services, mediation procedures and civil proceedings give the
Easy go, said just how you live. Oh, take it all, but you never give. Sure enough, you were strong from the first kiss. Had your eyes wide.
You're pregnant. You must tell your employer as soon as possible. You should also tell them where you want to start.
All about awake, asleep, I swoon, I saw, but cannot blot them out. A girl I never can forget who spoke my heart to joy. When coming to the spring, she met a baby.
And give a talk about copyright. So let's begin. Copyright, truth and myths. Copyright law is a part of a set of laws that are generally referred to as intellectual property or IP for short. IP laws are different to laws that involve physical property, such as land and houses, fridges, watches and bicycles. IP laws seek to protect something which can be touched.
In my head every day, everywhere. You're like I'm talking, ice and colder.
My name is Diana Kamizova and I represent People's Friendship University of Russia. So, in our modern world, a great deal of new inventions, trademarks and other intellectual property objects appear every day. It's an obvious fact that inventors wish to preserve their right for invention and their authorship. Patent as a legal conception was instituted for these purposes. According to the factual evidence, possessing a patent does not always mean 100% defense of its owner's rights, and still there are some indistinct points in this field.
Maybe it's a stupid question, but
yes.
What do you think? Should ethical or moral consideration be taken into account?
welcome to the court and thank you for giving up your valuable time to be here. You're fulfilling a very important legal obligation as a juror that can be inconvenient and disruptive to your daily life, so we're very grateful for your cooperation. Your role as a juror is an important one. You'll need to carefully consider all the evidence presented to you during the trial, and then, together with your fellow jurors, decide whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the offence they've been charged with.
So, living in Russia, we can be proud of many things, such as luxuriant nature, spacious territories, high culture and vast achievements in many spheres, the possibility to learn their customs, speak the same language with them, in the Caucasus, Yakutia and Tatarstan as well. As a consequence of such ethnic and religious variety, many collisions owing to ethnic origin happen. We often encounter misunderstanding and mutual open hostility. The much talked of cases of student Ivan Agafonov, who was killed by Rasul Mirzaev, combat mixed fight champion of the world. My aim is not to find out the reasons of the young man's death and peculiarities of the case. That is the prerogative of justice. I just seek to examine the after effects and problems which led to such public discord of the preamble of the Russian Federation Constitution are significant in Yakutis, Jews, Udmurts, Dagestanis, Kabardians, Chechens, is for all sane and adequate people.
What's your opinion on the Article 282 of Russian Criminal Code?
Specify it, please.
Article 282 is the article that means that people who try to
And I'm going to recite you a poem, She Walks in Beauty, written by George Gordon Byron. She walks in beauty, like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to the tender light which Gordon.
The present state of the family does not inspire much optimism. Its problems seem intractable. Now, in mass media, there are a lot of fuss about the crisis of the family. There are even statements about the disaster of family life being experienced by our society.
And debt problems. The United States of America was held by the formal limit of the debt. On the last working day of 2011, the state debt of the USA was $15,222 trillion.
What looks, smells and tastes like terrorism is terrorism. Terrorism is an large problem. Terrorism is a large problem with no easy solutions. It is a very controversial term which has never been successfully defined by the international community. Such as Syrian bombings by Chechen rebels in Russia, Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka, Kashmiri militants in India, Palestinians in Israel, and Maoist rebels in
Something in the wake of your smile. I get emotion from the look in your eyes. Yeah, you build a love, but the love falls apart. Your little piece of heaven turns to dark. Listen to your heart when he's calling for you. Listen to your heart.
Nowadays, in international law, there is a vast view on question of recognition. States, governments in exile, rebels as Belgian part, are usually act as objects of recognition.
Dear professors and colleagues, I'm Kate Dramova. I represent People's Friendship University of Russia. The topic of my presentation is criminal extradition. Criminal extradition is the delivery of an accused or convicted person by one state to another state, on whose territory he or she is alleged to have committed or to have been convicted of a crime. The question of extradition arises when a state requests that a person who is suspected of an offense is under prosecution or has been convicted and who is outside the territory of that state be extradited to it. Most countries in the world have signed bilateral extradition treaties with almost all other countries. No country in the world has an extradition treaty with all other countries. Extradition treaties often provide exceptions under which a nation can be refused to surrender a fugitive sought by another nation. Many nations will not extradite individuals who are charged with certain political offenses such as treason, sedition, and espionage. Refusal to extradite under such circumstances is based on the policy that a nation that disagrees with or disapproves of another nation's political system will be reluctant to return for prosecution. A dissident who likewise has been critical
and result in the removal of the child in question from his or her adoptive home is sometimes considered more forgivable than the latter. Intentional actions are typically recognized in some forms. It's black market adoptions, illegal trafficking, and personal privacy, family secret, the defense of honor and reputation. However, the state breaks the rights of one person when it defends the rights of another one. When a real disease, as a rule, can be cured and its existence is less danger for a person, but HIV infection, which is caused by human immunodeficiency virus, is much more serious and remains incurable and results in death.
Physical characteristic, presence or absence partner. Women which have agreed voluntary participation in program can be a substitute mother. Substitute motherhood usually considered as the new reproductive technology, similar to conception in a test tube, as a new recognized method of treatment such medical deviation as birth of baby.
I believe it's meant to be, darling. I watch you when you're asleep.
I would like to thank the Russian Academy of Justice for an opportunity of participating in the conference and the chance to present my points of view on some topical and burning questions. My name is Sherbakov Alexander and I represented the People's French University of Russia, and today my presentation is fully devoted to Russia's accession to the World Trade Organization. To involve you in the question, I put content on the slide. To begin with, I think it's necessary to quote the former Russian Minister for Finance, Alexei Kudrin. Quotation: Russia takes the risk of being at the newly established post-crisis international trade rules backyard if it does not become a member of the WTO. Most of the issues that the WTO focuses on derive from previous trade negotiations, especially from Uruguay round. I hope you are informed about the piece of news that on 15 till 17 of December, the decisions of Russia's accession to WTO was adopted within the framework of the 8th WTO Minister Conference. The list of advantages. There are some of them on the slide, but I want to mark out 5 of them in order to describe consequences in full measures. The list of disadvantages. I based my points of view on the articles of these honorable scientists. You can see their names on the slide. Nevertheless, the devil is not so black as he is painted, and Russia has bright prospects after WTO accession. Even some senior officials believe in it, like transport into agreement which will be equal in rights, but not a kind of binding contract, which would not be able to force us and would not let the member countries to devour our economy. Thanks for your attention.
Why are we so not so strong?
I did not understand the second part of the question. Could you please repeat? No. Only the second,
yes,
the last part.
Our position of our leaders is weak.
Answer 2.
Money he needs to get high. A bank executive embezzles a big sum of money in order to run off with his girlfriend to enjoy life in Bahamas. But what is the common motive behind all these crimes, and what reasons could possibly drive a person to making such terrible things? And so I've decided to discuss a major causes of crime in the United Kingdom, the country with a long history of crime.
There are 4 main purposes of the foundation of the United Nations. Will you pay your attention to the first one, to keep peace throughout the world? There are 6 main bodies of the United Nations: General Assembly, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, Trusteeship Council, International Court of Justice, and Secretariat. So, General Assembly. The General Assembly is the main deliberative organ of the United Nations and is composed of representatives of all member states.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pavel and I represent the People's Friendship University of Russia, and I'm going to talk about the European Court of Human Rights. So this is contents. First, some general facts about the court, and then I'll introduce you. So the European Court was established on the 21st January in 1959 by virtue of Article 19 of the European Convention of Human Rights, when 8 signatories acknowledged the jurisdiction of the court. Here are some important dates. Then guarantees that are provided by the European Convention. He's a Tajikistani-born Russian lawyer, former professor of the Academic Law University of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and currently the judge of the European Court of Human Rights. His term will end on the 31st of October. And I'll say that here you can see representatives who are involved practically in all branches of law. For example, criminalists, then civil experts in civil law, and so on and so forth. I think that's all that I wanted to tell you about the European Court of Human Rights, so thank you for your attention.